going on, guys? Noah with Madison Angling, and today's video is all about the walleye fly. I've had a lot of requests for this video. A lot of people have been wondering how to fish with walleye flies, and for those of you who maybe don't know what a walleye fly is, that's a walleye fly. I got some bucktail, a little bit of flashaboo, a hook, really simple. In the loosest term of what a fly is, we can call this a fly. But anyway, today I'm going to show you my 3 favorite ways to rig up and fish walleye flies for spring walleyes. All right, so there are 3 different ways that I like to fish walleye flies. The way that I choose to fish these flies is entirely dependent on what the conditions are that I'm fishing. So typically I'm fishing obviously springtime walleyes on river systems, and the current is definitely the deciding factor on how to fish these flies. So for example, if we're fishing in a lot of current, I'm gonna be doing something that's gonna get down to the bottom quick with a fair amount of weight, and it's gonna be a more compact presentation. That way we don't have a ton of leader hanging out, we don't have a bunch of drag in the water. It's easier to keep bottom contact and keep those flies where they need to be. Or if we're fishing the opposite conditions where we have very little current or no current, I'm gonna switch things up to an approach that's going to allow you to fish more slowly and still maintain action on the flies. So the first way that I rig these, and probably the most common way to do it, is with a basic 3-way rig. And I apologize if you can't see it real clearly, but I've got about a 7-foot medium to medium heavy spinning rod. I've got about 20-pound braid on here. I'm not real picky about what I use for a rod and reel. I just use whatever I have kind of laying around. I've got a size, I believe that's a size 5 3-way swivel, and I bring that to about a 2-foot long leader down to my walleye fly. This one's actually tied a little bit longer than I'd like, but that's pretty much how I have this rigged up. So I got my single walleye fly, relatively short leader, and you may have noticed here kind of in the background, I've actually got, instead of a weight on here, I've actually got a jig. And I'm gonna use this term very loosely. So those of you out there that know more about this particular rig than I do, please be nice to me, but this is kind of my rendition of something called a Dubuque rig, where you'd have basically a 3-way rig, but instead of a lead weight, like we usually use some kind of a pencil sinker for most of these 3-way rigs, instead of doing that, since we're in Wisconsin, we're allowed 3 lines per person, I'm giving myself another line by using a jig and a piece of plastic. And the advantage to doing that, especially with a jig and a piece of plastic on the jig, is you're completely artificial as far as your rig goes. So if you swing and miss a fish, you can drop right back to that fish, and a lot of times you're gonna catch that fish. So that's the first way I like to fish these, is on kind of a shorter 3-way. And this is something I'll do in kind of slow to more medium current speeds, something that I can cast and kind of cover water with, and it can be absolutely deadly. All right, the next way that I like to fish flies is kind of the more traditional way, and that is pulling flies. And this whole fly thing more or less started up on the upper lakes chain of the Winnebago system, so the Fox River and Wolf River, and actually this is very commonly referred to as a Wolf River rig. But I've got, instead of the spinning rod, I've got a bait caster. I've got a 7-foot medium bait caster. I've got 20-pound braid on here to cut the current. And you'll notice I've actually got a 2-fly rig here. So I've got a longer leader. I've got about a 3.5-foot leader down to about a 12-inch dropper. I've got about 1.5 ounce pencil sinker on here. And the whole idea with this rig is that we're trying to cover water. So essentially what I'll do, if I find an area in the river that has a concentration of fish, I'm going to put the boat into the current, and I'm actually going to creep just up current, just fast enough that we're actually going forward in the current. And I'm basically going to pump the rod and make contact with that weight on the bottom. And you basically just kind of creep along, cover water doing that. And when you go to sweep the rod to move the flies, if you feel any weight, set the hook, reel in the fish. It's really simple. And the cool thing is, with these longer leaders, you can get away with running multiple flies. Or if you want to, you can run a fly and a single hook with a minnow. The combinations are endless, but this is one of my absolute favorite and definitely time-tested ways of fishing flies. And the third and final way that I like to fish walleye flies is maybe a little bit less conventional, but it works incredibly well, and that is the drop shot rig. Drop shots are one of my absolute favorite ways to catch fish, all different species, but especially walleyes. But if you're fishing kind of small areas, if you have an area of slack water that you're kind of picking apart, this is a great way to do that. Or if you're fishing in an area where there's almost no current at all, you can really get down there and put this thing right in their face. And the key with the drop shot is you're using this in, again, places where there isn't a lot of current, which is why you're fishing the fly above the bottom. The flies do absolutely nothing in the water if there's no current. So those three-way rigs lend themselves well to current because that current's pulling them around, moving them around, and keeping the fly up off the bottom. But if you were to fish that three-way in no current, unless you're moving it a lot, which you shouldn't do when the water's really cold, you're not going to get any action on those flies. They're going to lay down on the bottom and you're not going to catch any fish. So if you're fishing slack water, I'll switch over to a drop shot. I've got about a 3/8 ounce weight on here, about a foot between the weight and my fly, and just your regular drop shot setup. I got about a 7-foot medium spinning rod with 8-pound fluoro. Really simple, but that is probably one of my absolute favorite ways to really kind of put on a show in front of people. And I've had a lot of people come out and fish with me and run the drop shots and run the castable three-ways, and they just couldn't believe how effective it was. So those are my top 3 ways that I like to fish walleye flies. I will have a link in the description below to how you can reach out to me if you want to get some walleye flies. I do make walleye flies. They're absolutely awesome. Shameless self-promotion, but they're absolutely indestructible. And at the end of this video, I will also have a link to a Today's Angler video, my buddies Robbie and Lee, where they went up to a tributary of Green Bay this past spring and absolutely smashed some giant walleyes on flies using the castable 3-way system. So hopefully you guys found this useful. Hopefully you guys take advantage of some awesome spring walleye fishing, and I will see you on the next video.